Juggalos in recovery. Juggalos in recovery. Juggalos in recovery.
All right. So even though it's that source of stress and conflict, it's important to be mindful that this is the time where you're supposed to be building your foundation that kind of shapes the entire arc of your sobriety. So you need to be focusing on what your daily routines are, what it is that you're trying to do to cope when you do get into stressful situations. And for a lot of us, we automatically go to the next closest person to us, which for a lot of us, we look for that comfort, that support, that structure in the form of a relationship because that's all we've known most of our lives. But that can cause a lot of turbulence, which most of us in this room have seen with people in that early recovery. It only takes one fuck up in a relationship to really kind of crumble the basis of a lot of people's sobriety. And that's why in like your AAs, your NAs, and rehabs, they recommend that you don't try to date for that first year because that first year is all about you. It's all about you learning how you have to handle the situations. It's all about you learning the ways that you have to cope with your own stress. It's not time to throw somebody else into the mix. And that's one of those things that we've seen time and time again where people fuck up because, that's the one thing they think they can carry over from their life drinking and drugging into a life of sobriety. But it's only that first year that really matters. One of the main reasons that it can be helpful to avoid getting into relationships during the early stages of recovery is because this is a time when a person is still learning how to navigate their sobriety and build a new foundation for their life. They may be dealing with challenges in managing their addiction as well as any underlying mental health issues or personal problems that contributed to their substance abuse. It can be overwhelming to try to handle all of these issues while also navigating the complexities of a romantic relationship. Additionally, when being in a relationship can often be a source of stress and conflict, which can be particularly difficult for somebody who is trying to maintain their sobriety. They may be struggling with feelings of shame, guilt, or low self esteem, and a relationship can bring these issues up and cause additional stress. It's important for people in recovery to focus on their own healing and growth and to take time and work on themselves and build up their own resilience before trying to navigate the challenge of a romantic relationship. And that's really the basis of why it's such a big struggle. It's fine to have personal relationships. It's fine to have friendships. It's even fine to have just friends with benefits, especially in that early stages. But when you try to tie emotions to these people, it becomes something that can become very unstable, especially when you're not a stable person during that time period. We just had a guy in here who was just a couple of weeks clean, was in a relationship, and then his relationship fell apart, and now he's out on a bender and is going to have to start all the way over if he can get back to that, just because his stability was bounced and he wasn't stable enough to bounce back. Now, I'm going to open it up to the room and see if anybody else wants to comment on that. I'm sure D's got plenty of experience with that, being that he works inside of the recovery world. He's talking. Anybody else want to talk on that? I can probably keep bullshitting for a minute.
Yeah, just give me about 5 minutes and then I'll join in.
Okay. So,
Yeah, I'll go.
all right, go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, so working with people in recovery and watching other sponsors and whatnot, yeah, it's highly recommended not to start any new relationships, serious ones in your early days of recovery, just because you really should be working on yourself and finding like your people in the recovery world. When I realized I needed to get, sober, I had lost my wife. She left with the kids, and I went into, you know, program right away, and we agreed that we would go at least 6 months without, um, being together, because we both needed to work on ourselves. Because the other side of the addiction coin too is the people in your lives that have to deal with you. So they go to like Al-Anon and they have their own program, and so she was working on herself. I was working on myself. I just focused on my program and myself for 6 months before we got back together. And even then, we started out slowly again. We started dating again, and kind of mending those fences like as we went along. And I started reevaluating other relationships in my life during that time as well, because to remain sober, I had to be around like-minded people, and hanging out with people that are not there yet wasn't going to be the best solution for me. So I had a lot of opportunity to you know look at that, look at my relationships, work on it with my wife. We started over again, and it was probably one of the best moves in the early stages, because you're able to just focus on yourself. What Because in my addiction, in mine personally, I didn't even really know like what was really good for me, what was healthy. I didn't know, like, I didn't want to work out every day. I didn't want to take care of myself. I wanted to just lay around and eat garbage and do whatever I wanted to do. And so I just relearned like how to live. So yeah, awesome topic, guys. So that's it for me for now.
All right, thanks for sharing, Nate. It's just one of those things about relationships, especially dealing with addicts, is they have huge codependency issues. And like that happens. We're dependent on our party friends that always want to party. We're dependent on our dealers to get us our shit. And it's part of the life that we've lived. And getting into another relationship where somebody is so dependent on you that that's what you base your entire life around instead of your own sobriety, you end up having a lot of issues. Okay, Stacy's got some shit to say about codependency.
Yes. So I realized that it honestly, even fresh in a relationship, Bryant, he's probably going to want to hurt you. um, Fresh in a relationship, even after, your newbie status, I guess you could say. Frank and I were in a relationship for like a year, and he was 6 years sober, and he was horribly codependent, and I'm not. And dealing with the fact that I'm not in recovery and he is, like, I was not ready for that jolt because it got bad. And so I have to constantly tell him, like, hey, you can do this by yourself. You're good, you're gone, you got it, man. Because it was like I couldn't do anything without him. Where are you going? Can I go with you? And then, tell her you're gonna be gone. No, 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 no. And I'm like, look, you're not gonna put up. You're not gonna control everything. I will give you what you need to know because you're getting to the point that you need to know every single second of everything and everybody I'm hanging out with. I can't have that. I like my privacy. In a relationship or not, I like my privacy, and I want you to be able to have the freedom to do whatever you need to do. That's going to AA meetings, running a meeting, or doing whatever. But the avenue of you making everything about me is not healthy for you or me. Got to have her space, but it was hard for him to realize that, even 6 years in.
Oh yeah, it's something that is kind of hard to tackle because the idea of codependency isn't specifically tackled inside of AA, NA, or any of the 12-step programs
Yeah.
because it's not something that comes up the way that it really should because it's something that we see on a constant basis because we're always looking for that control. We're looking for that structure, and that has to come from everybody around us, especially for the people that are so used to these structured environments, like the fresh out of jail or fresh out of rehab or fresh out of working hard 12 steps. They're so used to this structure of everything being checked in, everything being the way that it is, that when something is even slightly out of it, it can throw everything off and that crumbles their reality.
I noticed that from the get go. I didn't realize that that was a codependency thing at first. I thought it was really cute. He was all about like, "What are you doing? Where are you at?" And I was like, "Sweet, like I like this. Nobody's ever done that before." But then it didn't stop. Like the honeymoon phase. You're getting a relationship. You got the honeymoon phase. You're all lovey dovey and can't wait to see each other. And then the honeymoon phase goes away. So I thought we never had one. It was reality all day because both of us, were like, no, this is what we need and da 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 da. Well, I didn't realize that him texting me and asking me what I'm doing all this codependency until I was out with friends and he got mad because I wasn't answering him.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a common thing. It's something that it needs to be talked about because it's an issue. D, you can go ahead.
Hey, I mean, all right. So anybody who's an alcoholic or an addict has codependency problems. It's very obvious. We're codependent on a drug. We're codependent on family and friends to get by. We're codependent on a job or anything else to keep us going when we're out there, right? So like the whole thing, like men with men, women with women, or whatever, when you first get sober, until you work your steps or your first year or whatever, is like why it's suggested is because when you're in that healing process, usually like a lot of harm is done to the opposite sex and in personal relationships, right? So like it's not suggested you go through the steps with the same sex sponsor, because going through your fifth step after writing a fourth step is like pouring your soul out to somebody, and it creates these emotional attachments or whatever. So there's the reasons behind that or whatever. I mean, I've seen opposite sex sponsors, but only in like the LGBTQ setting or whatever. Um, but like the best thing probably for me is like my first like 11 months, me and my wife now were split up. Like she left me and like we were done. Like I didn't see that getting back together, but that first 11 months, like I totally surrounded myself with people that had multiple years of sobriety, that were doing the damn thing, that were happy and at peace, and they're all joking and having fun and living their best lives. But in the meetings, they were talking about the solution and what got them sober and how they're staying sober. Right. So those were the network of people I found myself like flocking to, because that's what I was trying to find it. And when I first got sober, I never knew what like being at peace or comfortable in my own skin was, or being happy. Like that's what I was trying to find when I first got sober. So I found that group of people, and I went through the steps process, and eventually with time, like everybody noticed like the changes before I actually noticed most of my own changes, and the way I perceived like the world and people started to change, and the way I felt about myself started to change. And one day, like I was coming back from seeing my kids with my wife, and we'd been sleeping around or whatever, but we're not together. And she's like, "You're basically my boyfriend." And I'm like, "No, the fuck I'm not." And she's like, "Well, we're sleeping around." I'm like, "Doesn't matter." Anyway, she asked me back out, and we've been together since then, and we got married. But basically, like when we got back together, kind of similar with like Nate, it had to be like a fresh start. Like that time apart was like a growing process. And when we got back together, there had to be like ground rules and a fresh start, and not using like our whole 10 years of history against each other, you know, because that wasn't going to make the relationship any healthier, you know, and that's what we're trying to have, is a healthy relationship and a healthy family, you know, relationship, not the toxicity that was before when I was drinking and drugging. So
Well, I mean that's kind of the whole thing is when
and then,
you're
oh, that's
go
the other
ahead.
thing about working in the recovery setting and being heavy in the rooms. I see so many new people. They don't even know who they are yet. They have this hole inside themselves and find the next good looking thing and think that this is going to be their rest of their life. And like you said, like they're not ready for it. So as soon as that relationship hits south, they're either both out or one of them's out. And next thing you know, there's people dying. People are dying left and right these days. And you know, the opiate fentanyl fucking crisis ain't getting any better. And it's the younger generation that I see it with a lot too. They get into a relationship and it doesn't turn out how they hoped it would be, and it crushes them because they have nothing else higher than that person or that substance to hold to, you know. And when you're not healed yourself and you ain't found something higher than a drug or a person to lean into, you're kind of just fucked at the end of the day, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean that's one of the things that I don't feel like we tackled in this one. We need to also talk about how important it is to have your community. Because you can't completely shun your social life, but the idea of going out and being social specifically to go bust a nut, that's fine. You go bust a nut, but you start catching feelings and you're more likely to have a stumble. It's almost better to just be abstinent or literally just have that one person you can go and bust a nut with and not try to establish any kind of real relationship.
In South Florida, we'll tell you to practice the 3 M's:
What's that?
meetings, meditation, and masturbation. Do that for your first year. You'll be all right.
Yeah, I mean that is solid advice. It's just it sounds like common sense to us that have been doing it for so long, but when you don't have that solid base, trying to get into that romantic shit, trying to
I
get into a relationship is just asking to stumble.
I guess it all depends on your background and where you're from. Like, I mean, because I've been on and off with the same woman so long, like I don't want to fucking build a new life with fucking nobody. I don't want to invest my time and energy. So when I got sober and I wasn't, she done shot me down the couple times I asked her out in early sobriety. I gave up on that. Was just kind of like doing my own thing. And I wouldn't have ended up hooking up with nobody else because I just couldn't picture investing that same kind of energy into nobody else. You know, it's just too much. You know, like
Yeah.
I've known middle school. Like I don't have that. You know, like if anything was gonna happen besides her, it'd have been like uh just fucking pay bills. You know.
Yeah. Now, does anybody else want to add in anything else before we end the recording? We're going to keep the room open, but we're going to get off live and the recording process. Yes, Stacy.
So I've wondered about, and this is kind of where I have a hard time asking Frank,
Uh-huh.
the relationship with him. But Bryant told me, well, trying to like give advice, which I'm always open to, and I had to tell Frank one time, I'm like, bitch, leave our past in the past. Stop bringing it up. Because if you're going to bring up what I've done in general and try to throw it in my face, trying to ruin the relationship, I was like, we're not going that route. And if it wasn't for something Bryant said, and I said it to Frank since he's been deployed, and I said, when you come home, anything that happened before you left for that deployment, if it has nothing to do with our bills or our house, you need to not bring it up. Same for me. Because all
That
it is bringing up bad shit.
I mean, that's smart. Nate also's got his hand up. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so I don't know, Stacy, what you've been to or not, but what my wife did was she went to Al-Anon and the Al-Anon program. And when she first went, I was like, well, why do you need a program? Like, you're not the fucking problem. Like, don't, like, why are you punishing yourself? Because I looked at it as a punishment. But she went and she explained that, it's about working on yourself. And she learned a bunch of tools on how to deal with my stupid ass in the Al-Anon program. So, it does help to have your own program, to coincide that works well with his program too. I mean, so I don't know if you mentioned that or not, but that would be my suggestion, is to check out, a program. Like, it'd be cool to, go in there and see how other people are dealing with people like us, because the addict or alcoholic or whatever is not an easy person to deal with. And you sound a little bit different the way you were talking, but most of the Al-Anon people that I've encountered, they're the ones that are codependent. They're the ones that are, hovering. They want to control everything, and that leads, like, to problems in relationships just in general. So, it might help to hit
So,
up your own program. But
yeah, I've been out before, and out here where we are in New Mexico, it really sucks because a lot of people just leave people that have addiction problems and don't try to fix things. I've been to a meeting out here, but I do one online. My dad was a raging alcoholic and he was very physically abusive. And I quit talking to him when I was 7. And I was like, I will never deal with somebody who's an alcoholic. Fuck that shit. And then I married one. And I realized how, like, different it is dealing with someone who is in recovery. I have friends that are still addicted to stuff that I have to keep at, arm's length, because I don't want anybody else that's in recovery to relapse being around them. So it's like trying to find the happy medium, make sure that everything's okay for Frank and I is better for me than to be, mean and critical and putting him down and trying to control him, because I don't like being controlled. So therefore, I'm not going to control my husband, or at the time, the guy.
right. Yeah. No, that's
Well,
good. That's good. That was just my suggestion. That's what I noticed that it's worked for my wife and whatnot. But yeah, awesome.
yeah. But Nate, you did also bring up an interesting point that I didn't think to bring up before, is that if you're already in a relationship when you go into recovery, there's also that potential for your partner to become that helicopter partner that's constantly trying to micromanage every aspect of your own struggle and recovery. And that can be just as damaging as, being single or being in a fresh relationship, because that's not teaching you how to grow. That's making you react to how other people want you to act. Yeah. Go ahead, D.
Oh, okay. So sorry, I had a phone call, so I got booted. Um,
Yeah.
the other thing though is codependency isn't all about the hovering and the monitoring and babysitting. Codependency is about not knowing personal boundaries and wanting to help and fix everybody else while not spending time to help and fix yourself, which that is Stacy. She's a helper and a
What?
fixer and puts herself on the back burner. I was saying about Al-Anon and codependency, it's not all about hovering and monitoring. It's about wanting to help and fix other people and not knowing your own personal boundaries and spending time helping and fixing yourself.
True that.
Sorry, guys. Got to bounce. Love you guys. Talk to you later.
All right, Nate.
Later,
Have a
Nate.
good night. All right. And I think with that, I feel like we've tackled a pretty wide plethora of the debacles of dating and being in relationships in early recovery. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add in?
So, not just in relationships, but the other thing I've noticed in early recovery is people, like I said, so to go with the codependency thing, people this is going to be perfect because my meeting's on the step 12 this week. But people step so far into step 12 of service work that they backburn themselves in trying to help other people in those type of relationships that they don't put themselves first and end up falling flat too. Because that is another form of like codependency in relationships, is trying to help all the sick and suffering and not give yourself time.
No, I totally see that one too. Anything else before I end the recording and the lives? Dope. All right. I gotta find the record button. That.